With the Venmo debit card, you can Venmo everything. Your favorite band's merch? You can Venmo this. Or their next show? You can Venmo that. Visit Venmo.me/debit to learn more. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Card may be used everywhere MasterCard is accepted. Venmo purchase restrictions apply.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. From improving emergency response times to protecting against cyber attacks, local, state, and federal governments are innovating with Google AI. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
These days, Jonathan Last, from over at the Bulwark, he's been thinking and writing a lot about the problem of caving. What percentage of domestic and world leaders would you say at this point have caved to Donald Trump in one way or another?
I mean, all of them, I think, to some degree. I mean,
is it more than you thought you'd see, say, back in November?
No, it is more than I...
You thought it would be full capitulation?
Yes.
Jonathan, JVL to his friends, he may have foreseen this, but it's still worth understanding the full breadth of what's going on. When JVL and I talk about caving, we're talking about the way Columbia University agreed to pay the federal government more than $200 million to ensure research funds continued to flow. We're talking about the way some white shoe law firms have offered pro bono legal representation to Trump's pet causes rather than face the government's wrath. We're even talking about the way a food company like Coca-Cola agreed to sell more soda made with cane sugar to appease RFK Jr.'s Department of Health and Human Services. JVL says you can convince yourself caving like this is kind of smart, but he calls it the surrender trap. You know who's not caving?
Tell me.
Jerome Powell.
Yeah.
Jerome Powell. Did you watch his presser last week with Donald Trump?
Yeah.
And we're with the chairman, as you know. Chairman, come on over.
This press conference was in the still being renovated headquarters for the Federal Reserve, of which Jerome Powell is the chairman. Both Trump and Powell are in hard hats.
And we're just taking a look at what's happening. And it's a tough construction job. They're building basements.
Donald Trump comes out with a piece of paper, claiming, the budget for this renovation here, it's way over. And you just see Jerome Powell start to shake his head like, no. And then he says something.
So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
He's like, this is not true. Donald Trump hands him the piece of paper. He looks it over and instantly, it's kind of genius. He's like, oh, well, you're counting this extra building in here.
Yeah. And thank God, because there has been some talk in economic circles that Jerome Powell should cave in order to save the Fed, like the way that Christopher Wray caved to save the FBI. I think that is a misguided view of these things.
Yeah, Christopher Wray resigned before Trump took office. And it was sort of a like, well, good game. Handshake, I'm out of here.
And I think in fairness to Christopher Wray, he seems to have talked himself into believing that it was better for the institution of the FBI not to have some gigantic political fight. I think he was wrong. But this is the problem, right? When you enter the world of caving, you get there because there are no good options. Right? You're purely evaluating least bad options, and it is hard for people and for institutions to distinguish among least bad options.
I guess I expected GOP capitulation, but the way corporate America has fallen in line, the way other countries and blocs have fallen in line, like just this week, right? You see the EU making this trade, quote unquote, deal with Donald Trump. Many argue it's not great for them. It just seems like tick, tick, tick. Everyone is just like, okay, here we are, sir.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's because power exerts a gravitational pull, and he has tremendous power. He has shown that the American system will allow him to use his powers in near dictatorial ways, right? I mean, Donald Trump runs everything.
Today on the show, if it seems to you like the president is facing little resistance, that may be because most of his opponents have simply walked off the field. So is there a way to escape the surrender trap? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
I think it's important that we lay out why caving is appealing. Because I think you make a pretty good argument in some of your writing that you understand why some of these institutions are making the choice to cave in this moment. And you think it's deeply tied up with liberalism, individual rights, basically the idea that that's the project we're engaged with here. So can you just lay out the appeal of caving in this moment?
Well, I mean, the appeal. So let's jump to the tech oligarchs, right? So if you're Mark Zuckerberg, why would you cave to Donald Trump? And well, the reason you would cave to Donald Trump is because you know there's no price for it. If Wes Moore becomes president in 2029,
Democrat from Maryland, governor.
Right. We'll just, again, I'm just picking that name. The Democratic Party and the White House is not going to come after Facebook because they're committed to liberalism. They don't do that sort of thing. And so if you are Mark Zuckerberg, like, this is free, right? I mean, holding to your principles and insisting that you are not going to do whatever Donald Trump tells you to do, that could cost you a lot under a Trump regime. But on the other hand, like, you know, going along with it, that's not going to cost it. There aren't going to be any Nuremberg trials, right? I mean, there's no Truth and Reconciliation Committee at the end of this story. The two parties have these very asymmetric sets of incentives right now. And I think one of the reasons the Democrats are facing a lot of headwinds right now, just sort of as a party, what that is Democrats looking at the incentives that the party has operated under for the last 8 years and saying, this didn't work, right? And looking and saying this idea of we're gonna pass kitchen table issue legislation and we're gonna work in bipartisan ways, that didn't work.
Which I guess leads to this question of what Democrats should be doing instead. And you basically make the argument that people in government, people like, say, Jerome Powell, currently the head of the Fed, or Christopher Wray, who was the head of the FBI and capitulated, that someone like Christopher Wray should take a lesson from Jerome Powell and just stick it out and obfuscate where you can. Essentially put yourself on the wheel. And I think what's interesting about your argument is that your argument isn't about winning.
Yeah.
Your argument isn't that when you do this, you will then, win a victory and this will be over. It's just that you will essentially show up and slow things down Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a series of holding actions, right? And it's no fun. Nobody wants to, I mean, it's no surprise that people don't really volunteer for this job, right? Like, hey, we would like you to take a loss in the most painful possible way because it's not going to save you. In fact, it'll make you miserable, but it will delay the authoritarian onslaught and take longer for them to get to the next institution. Like, oh, great, sign me up.
Can I ask you how deep you think this form of resistance should go? Because the Christopher Wrays and the Jerome Powells of the world are people with real status. They're people who will show up at a press conference with the president of the United States. You know what I mean? Like, that's a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of safe. But there are lots of people underneath them who aren't. And then there are lots of other institutions, corporations and countries, leaders of those places, where maybe the incentives are different. So how deep does this advice go for the person who's a coder over at the Center for Medicaid and Medicare? Like, is this advice for them too? I say this pretty much whenever I talk about this stuff. None of this is life advice or legal advice or professional career advice. This is like I am not a doctor. Please talk to a doctor about your medical condition.
Yeah. I think that people who are safe, meaning that they have the resources to withstand this sort of thing, really do have a moral duty to do it. If you are Christopher Wray, you are going to make 7 figures every year for the rest of your life. You are going to be okay regardless of what you do. It is a moral failing to do what he did. For somebody who's a GS7 or a GS9, who's got a kid or a mortgage or pick, right? You know, all your other things, like they are doing what they have to do. I think you should not cooperate with evil. If you are being asked to do evil things, you should not say like, oh, hey, I was just not following orders. But I don't think that it's necessarily incumbent upon you to, I don't know, like give up your job or something, right? I mean, again, if you are sort of doing work that is morally acceptable and maybe even good in the world, I don't think it's incumbent upon you to throw yourself over the tracks. And honestly, how much good would it do for you to do that anyway? The truth is, the elites are the ones with most of the leverage here, and they're the ones who could accomplish the most. I had a guy I know who was in the middle of an asylum hearing.
He was an attorney or someone else?
No. He was an immigrant seeking asylum here, and he'd been under like 9 years into this process. And so he had to go and show up and be given his final decision as to what the government was going to accept his asylum claim. And he went to the immigration office and, went through a very harrowing final interview, and some bureaucrat there granted his asylum claim. And I have to imagine that if you work in immigration right now, you know what the score is. And you know what the administration wants from people.
He must have felt like he dodged a bullet.
Well, my friend did feel like he had absolutely dodged a bullet, but yeah, that's not what happened. What happened is that a person who works for the government took their job seriously and knew what the government wanted and didn't give it to them. And instead they held to the law because I just think that my friend's asylum claim was just legally very sound, like satisfied all the things. I mean, of course I would say that, but my point is that this is somebody, if you just say, oh, what are people even doing still working for the immigration system, which is a thing I've heard. And the answer could be, well, if you're taking your job seriously and you're committed to doing it truthfully and lawfully, regardless of what your bosses do, and if they eventually see it and decide they want to fire you, well, so be it. You can still like do good things within the system. And I'm grateful for the woman who did her job.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so here's a question for you. For the elites who you're talking about, they really have a duty to kind of stick it out and do what they need to do here and set an example. I'm wondering, some of them make this argument, like you could see this with Jim Ryan, the president of the University of Virginia. He resigned under pressure from the Trump administration.
Yep.
There was an ongoing investigation into the school's DEI efforts. And he framed his resignation as protective. He was basically like, I'm a steward for the university community. I need to make sure that community gets what it needs from the federal government. My resignation is to ensure that. I think you can see the same argument from some governors, for instance, like Gretchen Whitmer, for instance, in Michigan.
Yep.
Like she showed up in Trump's office and covered her face with a folder. But, her argument, I think, would be Michigan relies on federal dollars. I have to make that happen here. What do you make of that argument?
So these are the people for whom I have boundless contempt. Because your duty is as a person first, not a fiduciary. And I am sorry, but the University of Virginia was not going to fold up shop. Mr. Jefferson's university was going to be just fine, right? Even if the Trump administration kept coming after it. And to put the parochial interests of the office you happen to hold ahead of like the broader interests of liberalism and free society is blinkered at best and craven at worst.
Well, they'd say the damage would be worse if I stayed, right? Like I won't get as much money for my students. The library won't be able to be renovated and whatever.
Yeah. And I think that is wholly inadequate.
And you'd say, do that, and like you blame Trump, basically. You say, this is why.
Right. I mean, do that and blame Trump. And because when you are saying like, oh, well, my library is going to get its money now. Yes, your library will get its money now, and the next guy down the line is going to have the eye of Sauron fall on them, right? I mean, this is how these things work. This is why Harvard really should not cave, because once Harvard caves, everybody will cave. You just can't do that. And we saw this with all the law firms, right? The white shoe law firms. Capitulation from one winds up leading to increased pressure on all. And I am sorry, like if we were talking about, the federal government has taken half of my students hostage and they're going to begin executing them at midday and they're going to kill a kid for every 20 minutes before I don't resign. Like you're in some movie or something. That would be fine. But resign
I have
in
that
to do
circumstance
it
because you're saving someone's life.
Sure, right. But for I need to get enough resources for our university that's an incredibly elite university with a large endowment and a powerful alumni base. Like, fuck you. I'm sorry.
So surrendering sucks, but part of what makes it suck is the way the GOP is behaving. More on that and what Hulk Hogan has to do with it after the break.
The Red Hot Clearance event is on right now at Burlington, and I'm excited for the markdowns. It's all about savings on top of savings throughout the store. This is when I stock up on styles for my closet, home decor, and much more because there's up to 70% off other retailers' prices on clearance. I mean, I'm going every day because these prices, too hot to miss. Burlington. Deals, brands, wow. Styles and selections may vary by location.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Amazon One Medical presents Painful Thoughts.
I've been on hold to make a doctor's appointment for 23 minutes now. The automated voice has told me 47 times that my call is very important to them. I'm starting to think that they don't think my call is important at all.
With Amazon One Medical 24/7 virtual care, you'll get help fast without having to remain on the line to make an appointment. Amazon One Medical. Healthcare just got less painful.
JVL argues part of what makes surrendering to Trump so problematic is that a surrender implies that the president and the GOP are acting in good faith when they aren't. In fact, the best analogy for the GOP's behavior, he says, it can be found in professional wrestling.
So wrestling comes from the world of carnivals, and wrestlers are all at heart carnies. They talk about they still call audience the marks. The audience are the marks, and the wrestling is the thing that you're putting over on the audience in order to draw money from them.
And they're the sharps.
They're the sharps, right? And wrestling was all about always understanding who the sharps and the marks are. And this has really come to American politics.
JVL started thinking about all this last week when Hulk Hogan died. Hulk Hogan was close to Trump, of course. He spoke at the Republican National Convention. And if you follow his career, you can see these very Trumpian moments, like this time back in the 90s when Hogan was asked to pick a side, stand by the federal government or stand by his old boss, the WWE's Vince McMahon.
So Vince McMahon is under investigation by the feds for a conspiracy to distribute steroids to his employees and also to demand that they take steroids as a condition of their employment. He is indicted. He goes to trial. At the moment this is happening, Hulk Hogan has left Vince McMahon's promotion and gone to the rival promotion. He and Vince had a falling out over it. And the feds believe that this means that Hogan is going to testify against Vince if they can squeeze him enough.
Which is not a crazy assumption.
Not a crazy assumption, because they go to Hogan and they say, you will be a target or you will be a source in this investigation. And Hulk says, okay. And he says that he tells them, I'll tell the jury whatever you want me to tell them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He gets his immunity deal. So he gets his immunity plea. It's done. And the prosecution puts him up on stage and they say, Mr. Hogan, or Mr. Balea at the time, have you ever seen Vince McMahon handling steroids? And Hulk says, no, never. And the prosecutors, it is like a moment from a TV courtroom scene. And they're like, have you ever heard him tell other wrestlers to take steroids? And Hogan's like, no, never heard Vince say anything like that. And he becomes a hostile witness and the prosecution loses their minds. And it's largely on the strength of Hogan's testimony that Vince McMahon is found innocent. And the government never pursues Hogan after this because they're so embarrassed. They've been pantsed by him.
But what does it tell you that even though Hogan was at business war with Vince McMahon, even though he said he would testify against him, none of this worked out? It seems like the loyalty ran so deep. What does that tell you about how loyalty and alliances work in the Trump White House?
All of this is, I think it's just, this is the way the MAGA forces look at politics and look at political life. It isn't about passing Medicaid expansion or, an infrastructure bill or it's not governing as legislating and creating laws that do things in the actual real world. It's just a series of identifying the marks and making sure that you're always the sharp.
Okay, one more thing, just because this just happened. And to me, it resonated with everything we're talking about. We're talking about this whole idea of institutional surrender, right? But it feels to me like we're having this conversation at the same time that individual Americans are responding to institutional failure with violence. I'm looking at what happened in Manhattan yesterday, right? Guy drives from Nevada. He goes to a building where the NFL is headquartered, and he shoots people. And he says it's because of traumatic brain injuries in football, as far as we know. This is early reporting. And I read this and I was like, ugh, this is like the Luigi of brain injuries, which is awful. Luigi Mangione, of course, killed a healthcare CEO in Manhattan also. And it just feels to me like these things speak to each other. The institutional weakness and caving the violence by individuals, I just don't know if you see this as related at all.
It is hard sometimes to look at our near-term future and see how it resolves without truly horrifying amounts of violence. That doesn't mean it can't. I mean, maybe it will resolve without it. I mean, we're playing with loaded guns here, both metaphorically and literally. And I just think of that. There's that scene in Hunt for Red October where Fred Thompson, who's the admiral, comes out onto the deck of his aircraft carrier as the Americans and the Russians are like getting closer to each other, and he says, "This thing will get out of control. It will get out of control, and we'll be lucky to live through it." Is what Fred Thompson says, and that's basically how I feel about America right now. I mean, we're only 6 months in. There's 3.5 years left of this. And I don't know how this all shakes out. Maybe it'll all work out. That's what I hang my hat on is that, America isn't and has never been great. We had slavery, we had a civil war, we had a Great Depression, we had Jim Crow, we have all these things which were worse than what we have now, even. And we muddled through it. And so, why shouldn't we muddle through this too?
I'm mostly worried that the next generation, we've exhausted them from participation with all of this. And I say this just because I have a 17-year-old, that's my bigger concern. They're flooded with this stuff. And he just wants it to be okay. And you have to fight through that. And that's hard. And every single system we've set up, the internet, the phone, whatever, is set up to convince him to stop trying. And that's what keeps me up at night.
Well, I worry the opposite, that it's the Overton window has shifted so that the world that the rising generation comes up in is a world with many more possibilities than it used to be. White nationalism is now a thing that you can sign up. When you are 17 years old and looking at the menu of things that exists for American public life, white nationalism is now on the menu in a way that it just wasn't 25 years ago. And there is no stigma around this stuff now, and I wonder what 10 years from now conservatism looks like in America, because, it ain't going to look like Nikki Haley and Marco Rubio. So you can keep telling yourself, no matter how bad it is, we'll pull our fat out of the fire at some point. But maybe we will. Maybe it'll all be okay. I don't know.
JVL, I'm always grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Jonathan Last is the editor of The Bulwark. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.